Well, good morning and welcome to Fox Valley Headline Makers. I'm your host, Tyler Bachman, and joined here today by Charlene Coulombe-Fiore with the Montgomery Economic Development Corporation. And Charlene, you are the Executive Director of MEDC, correct?
Correct.
Thank you so much for coming in. I just wanted to say, I don't think I've had the pleasure of having you on the show, and it's good to have you here in the studios.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I first off wanted to just talk a bit about you and your background. How did you, or where are you from originally, I suppose, and how did you get involved with MEDC?
Sure. I grew up in Berwyn, and I started working. My initial career really started in banking.
Mm-hmm.
However, then I moved into the economic development industry and started working for the town of Cicero, which actually in June it'll be 30 years that I've been serving in this capacity for economic development and helping communities grow.
Yeah. What initially, I guess, made you want to make the jump from banking to the economic side of things? What interests you about economic development?
Well, it was something that kind of just happened. My background, I had a marketing degree and the finance part of it. The town of Cicero had actually recruited me,
Mm-hmm.
and the banking industry, I worked for the largest bank in Chicago, and they went through a series of nightmares.
Oh, yeah.
So it was Continental Bank. They're no longer around, and they
Yeah.
actually survived the war.
Oh, okay.
So it was like kind of big news,
Yeah.
but I was really very fortunate, and it was exciting because I love people, business.
Mm-hmm.
It had financing in it where I was going to help a depressed town grow.
Yeah.
So I found it very exciting.
And so how long have you been with the Montgomery Economic Development Corporation?
About 8.5 years.
Yeah. And when you came to them, I guess, what exactly is it that MEDC does, and what do you do with them to promote Montgomery? I know that's a lot of what your job is.
Yes. So, an economic developer does a lot of things.
Yeah.
The job description can vary depending
Wear several
on...
hats, I'm assuming.
Oh yeah, lots and lots of hats. So you serve as a negotiator, a liaison between taxing bodies, marketing people, real estate,
Mm-hmm.
Fire department, village staff. The goal is to get people and businesses and the community to work as a team. You'll also work with the surrounding communities as a part of regionalism. So we meet on a monthly basis in Kendall County, and because Montgomery is so unique being in Kane and
Sure.
Kendall,
Right.
I also have Kane County that I work with, and I we work very closely with the colleges,
Okay.
specifically, primarily, probably Wabansie for startup businesses, small business development, and obviously workforce development is huge.
Right. And so you guys are a nonprofit you're funded through the taxing bodies, is that right?
We are actually funded by a combination
Okay.
of funding sources. So some is from the village, and some is a collection from business owners and membership.
Yeah.
And then also taxing bodies, such
Sure.
as like the fire department, the library, the school district, because what we do is help increase the tax base.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what we do, and
Sure.
that's their thank you, I guess.
We were joking off air that I always see you at the village board meetings because Montgomery's my beat, and I always see you there at it. And I wanted to talk a bit about specifically your relationship with the village board, with the village staff. You talked tonight. You're going to a planning and zoning commission meeting. I know you work very closely with them.
Yes. I can't really get anything done without the village.
Yeah.
So everything I do will start out, first it'll start out with the business needs. Sometimes it'll start out with actually the village needs as well. If they say, Shar, I want this, then I will try to focus on their specific needs.
Yeah.
It's gone from manufacturing to Douglas Road to retail, sit-down restaurants. Primarily, I work with community development, and then I also rely very strongly on the trustees who I've gone through several, well, 2 administrators, a couple community development directors too, but so each one you learn what their strengths are and how they can help you get your job done.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
well, I want to make sure we can talk about some of the things I had in mind today, and we'll get in kind of to more of some of the things you talked about in this presentation. But you made a presentation, I believe, 2 meetings back at the Village Board, and one of the things that I've been talking with tons of people about, from Matt Brawley in the Village to Kendall County officials, and even our congressman, right now in the area. Caterpillar, obviously, that's been a big story for the last several months since they had announced that they're going to be transitioning their work to another facility. And I wanted to talk with you. You'd said, I believe, in the presentation that there could be some that still have the shock over Cat. What is the latest that you've heard on the Caterpillar process of finding a tenant or possible tenants for that space, and what kind of work have you had in that project?
Sure. We started right away. We were notified, and we created a actual focus group, if you will, task force.
Right.
And there's actually 2 parts to it. And first is kind of the working group, and then the other side is obviously the strength and the political side of things.
Right.
So we started, one, trying to understand the timing, the vision, was it permanent, how this was going to be divided, what are some of the things that we could do. Then we had to focus on what that actual asset was, and then what we could do to maybe look at whether it was annexing the property, because the control is in Kendall County, so it's unincorporated. And it's a 350-acre site.
Yep.
And
a couple billion square feet from what I remember.
Yes.
Yep.
And we had calls from the beginning of the announcement. The issue was we didn't know if those calls were coming in to get the listing to help sell it, or if the calls were actually coming from people who had an interest in the parcel. So as it is today, Caterpillar has hired Jones Lang. They might have another long name. They're out of Chicago. I think it's JLL.
Are they a marketing firm, or are they?
They're actually a brokerage firm, and we met with them in November. I think they signed a contract in October, and then they had asked that the first 90 days, which probably are going to be January, February, and March, get the word out there and see if they could find one end user. And then if that doesn't work or nothing comes to fruition,
multiple.
Then it could be multiple, and then it could also be divided. So it's a little complicated. But I'm an optimist, so I always look at, I got land, I got employees, and so I try to take that optimistic, look at things. And it's funny, but the business community outside of Montgomery will also do that. When they see a plant closure of any kind, I mean, they swarm to that community.
Right. Do you guys set timelines for when you'd like to have a potential, you talked about the difference between maybe having one user in there versus multiple tenants, and is there like any kind of a timeline in place for when you would want to kind of make the switch to looking more towards a multi-tenant deal, I suppose? I'm just wondering, because I know people talk about a lot, wanting to find a use for that facility. You don't want it to sit vacant there because it still has to, I'm assuming, be heated, and you've got the taxes that get paid on the property, all of that. So I guess I just didn't know if there's kind of a timeline in place for figuring out what that space might really look like.
Sure. Part of the issue is that timeline is in the hands of Caterpillar. The property has not been vacated yet, although they've been very kind in allowing people to see the site, go through the site. Should somebody be serious about looking at the site, we had a tour back in November and went through the sites inside different buildings and so on. the timeline is really going to depend on Caterpillar and the positions that they intend to keep there, and then how that would be kept. They have, I can't remember, 90
Okay.
or 100 and something engineers that they wanted to stay there. I think what would have to happen is, maybe that front building would have to be, modified so then everyone could be under one roof, and then the rest of it will be, I don't know if I want to say taken apart in pieces, but
Sure.
the other thing is they have their own rail, they have some of their own water source.
Right.
They do use some solar energy. It's like their own little world in some ways.
Yeah, sure.
So,
well, let's move on and talk about Buddig. Buddig is a company that's coming into the village, and they're going to be taking over, I know, a portion of the former Butterball facility, and I know it had ownership before that. So let's talk about that project a little bit.
Sure. So, well, the exciting news is, it first started with a family-owned business that I believe was grown in Montgomery. It was the Caballero family, and they had hams. And as I was talking to you earlier, and also I tried to get the village to also look on the positive side, they were maintaining about 100 to 160 employees. Maybe at the time of the sale to the Butterball folks, they were at about 260. But then from 2005 to 12, Butterball's been in there about 5 years.
Yeah, right.
And they grew substantially. And of course, they brought in the turkey and still, in addition to the ham.
Right.
So that's how it grew to 660. But the exciting thing is Montgomery and the area, those were some really tough times. And, both Fox River, now Performance Foods, and Gusto or Butterball, and now Buddig, really serve the community kind of as a cluster. And all those employees and labor have specific skills. So replacing, Butterball with Buddig is kind of the best case scenario.
Sure.
So they are purchasing the entire building, which is 280,000 square feet. I'm excited about that because that gives them room to grow.
Right.
So if their estimate starts at 180 to 250 in the first year or two, they still have plenty of room to multiply that over and over again.
I know they talked about they could be, I think the estimate that they had originally announced is maybe they could be up to a 350 mark in 5 years' time. Not sure exactly how many people that is. But so are we thinking that maybe some of the Butterball employees that had worked there before would be going to work for Buddig? Do you have any indication on that, I guess?
Yes, actually I do. We've been fortunate through different labor markets. There are some Butterball employees. One manager, I believe, even. And Butterball was pretty instrumental in helping with the Buddig deal, which really says a lot for not only the MEDC but the village, because we worked with them, to make things run smoothly as best as we could. We provided a loan. There were a lot of things. The MEDC worked very closely with Butterball, and again, Buddig they own several companies.
Sure.
They have a lot of different names. I did bring the slides.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they're also a family-owned business.
Right, I know.
And they've been in existence for 75 years. So that, again, to me is exciting.
Right, and I'm sure the facility itself probably is already very well set up for that kind of work, I would assume. Or not as much. I don't know.
Yeah, there are some things that I do believe will help them tremendously. I'm not really sure how the division is going to take place. I do know that they are putting, some infrastructure in there having to do with the drains.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Stuff like that. You know, the meat process, some of it will be very similar. So that then ends up being, you know, a part of the water usage.
Yeah.
So it replaces that as well. So those are very, very good things.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
rather than tearing everything out.
Right.
So, and I do know they bought some equipment, but not all of the equipment.
Sure.
So.
Sure. I wanted to make sure we also talked about VVF. We had talked about that, I suppose, in this presentation as well
We
that you had
did.
made. And VVF is getting rid of their bar soap line at the Montgomery facility, I know. But you know, I wanted to talk about what some of those jobs might look like. I think it was, if I remember off the top of my head, but I think it was about 250 or so jobs I thought were going to be lost. But there's a possibility that these people are skilled laborers, could find other work.
Absolutely. And I think their total employee count was about 270.
Right, they are going to be retaining.
And I
employees
thought,
still.
yeah, they were keeping about 70.
Right.
And I do know some of the high-end managers are going to make a move. They grew their family in this area, and moving on is not a problem.
Sure.
But I do know that their employees and their staff are in high demand. And they worked very hard to keep their employees. And they've made different offers as far as, you know, if they want to stay or go. But a lot of them, you know, they work with equipment, and, you know, some of them are also different types of engineers.
Sure.
So, you know, I think their expertise can be used in many different places. So I haven't really heard anything. We don't want to steal their employees yet.
Sure.
They'd like to keep them around.
Right.
You know, this is going to phase like right around the September, October timeline as well. And they still have other products.
They do.
Yeah. So.
Well, great. Want to make sure we get to talking about plenty of the accomplishments in the village that you've had a hand in working on, goals, things like that. We're going to take a quick break. We'll come right back after this.
The color in my garden keeps the pink in my cheeks. I was very independent and thought I could take care of myself. I fell and I had to have Meals on Wheels. They're my savior. My name is Lola Silvestri. America, let's do lunch.
Drop off a hot meal and say hello. Volunteer by donating your lunch break at America Let's Do Lunch.
I see you mobbing over her. Let's go. Let's mob. Let's crawl. Let's crawl. Let's crawl. Hey, yo, we mobbing. Come on, girl. Let's crawl. Hey, yo, let's crawl. Hey, yo, let's crawl. Hey, let's crawl. Hey, yo, let's crawl.
They call me Prince like I'm royalty or something. But the places I've lived ain't no palaces. So I don't need grilled salmon or a new scratching post. Just give me a cardboard box and a can of tuna and we're good. You can even change my name. I'm cool being the kitty formerly known as Prince.
They're coming. Places, everybody.
Light check. 1, 2, 1, 2.
Everything looks good on our end.
And lights.
Come alive with the forest. Visit discovertheforest.org to find a forest near you.
Welcome back to Fox Valley Headline Makers. Again, Tyler Bachman, your host here today, and I'm joined with Charlene Coulombe-Fiore, who's the Executive Director of the MEDC, which is the Montgomery Economic Development Corporation. And Char, I wanted to make sure we chat on this. I almost forgot to mention it, and it was something that was really important that you mentioned at that presentation about the relationships that you guys have with the businesses that are in the Montgomery Village at this point, and kind of having that relationship maintained. So tell us about that and kind of the outreach you do with the businesses that we have here.
Absolutely. You know, having a relationship with, the businesses kind of helps the MEDC and the village learn of perhaps any issues or concerns or things that we could do to make it better. We also want to make sure that they don't have a problem picking up the phone, as Kurt did, when VVF had their discussion. And so that opens a lot of doors to find out their interest. I know probably eight years ago when I started working with VVF, I found out that they had additional land. And later down the road, that land ended up getting sold to Old Dominion because of just knowing. I don't think, it was anything that anybody would have known that they would consider selling off some property. So retention helped in many, many ways if they're going to close down or if they're going to have a building available. So I try to meet with the local businesses. It's not easy. You try to make a few appointments a month and have an ongoing relationship. For years, probably over 10 years, the MEDC had what we called a Business Climate Enhancement Committee meeting. And businesses would come on a Thursday morning once a month. And, every month it was always different. Sometimes we had an agenda. Well, we always had an agenda, but we might have had a topic or a learning subject. But it was also a great time to get businesses to know each other and also work together. So we call it our Business Retention Program. And we do that sometimes even with the mayor, or I primarily work with the community development director, and we either go out to the company or talk on the phone, or at least say hello and let them know who they can talk to. I even created a 5-page document to assist any business should they have any issues or concerns, who to contact. It's just nice to have on hand. So you're not going through some, whatever you call those nightmare voice messages. So you know who to call, what button to push, and they appreciate that. So
what are some of the things that you hear from the businesses in the community, whether it be things that they say, oh, this would be great if we had this thing to utilize, or I guess good things that you hear from the community with work from the MEDC?
Sure. For years, the BCEC also did a cleanup. And I did that a lot along Alcott Road, and VVF was helpful. A lot of the big businesses were. Anytime there was something that could be a distraction or take away from the image, so the businesses were very helpful. They're very kind. They're very contributing. Sometimes they talked about traffic. Orchard Road was a big accomplishment for the MEDC. It started with a Kane County member who then reached out to all the businesses along Orchard Road. The business community also helped with the road referendum, which was huge because infrastructure is very huge for any business community. The railroad is also another big thing for Montgomery. We have several new companies that utilize the rail. So that's exciting. I think that communication and having the ability to pick up the phone and call somebody, I'd love to do a video from all the businesses and use that as a testimony. And just driving through Montgomery, I think it's pretty easy to see, obviously, the Alcott Road corridor, good manufacturing going on, but you guys also have plenty of other economic development throughout the village as well, from restaurants, retail spaces, etc. Yes.
So yeah, well,
we're working on it.
Exactly. Well, let's do this. Let's chat about the some of the things that in your presentation were accomplishments from last year, and maybe a few goals that you have coming up for this year or years to come.
Sure. On the accomplishment side, again, everything that we do is a part of the business community and the village. Also, the taxing bodies. The fire department is huge, and Montgomery we're served by 5 different fire districts.
Right.
So if there's an issue with an upgrade in a building, we try to work with the business and managing that and addressing the fire safety and finding out what the problems are.
Yeah.
Accomplishments really started with the whole Alcott Road and the TIF district created there. That property had plans for over 3 decades. So now that the rail is being utilized and several companies are there, that's a huge accomplishment. It's snowballing into creating a name for Montgomery and putting us on the map. On the Orchard Road corridor, as well as the 30 and 34 corridor, is also another accomplishment that actually was started right before I arrived.
Okay.
And I was able to help fuel that. However, I can't take credit for initiating it, but I often am in the background and finding out if there's any kind of miscommunication that people work together. So I remember one of the first ones was Bona Beef and how many letters are on the awnings, and I happen to grow up in Berwyn, and that's where Bona's from. So it's like, and then when you've been in the business as long as I have, you know a lot of people, and you just have to be honest with them and let them know how great Montgomery is to work with, and then that will dovetail into additional development, strength. So it's exciting. It's nice to work for a fairly small community or a mid-sized community, and watch the effort, and how you made things happen. And again, with many people as a part of it.
Well, let's just end on this. Maybe a goal or two that you have coming up for the next year or for the years to come.
Sure. We need some money.
Us
Money's
too.
important. Yeah. Continued collaboration and growth. I think that we still need a variety of things that the residents want. More flexibility, more options on restaurants and purchasing things, furniture store. A hotel is on the wish list. So a lot of fun things yet to still work on.
Yeah, absolutely. And is there one in particular, whether it be, you talked about a few different things. Is there one in particular that maybe it's like, oh, this year we'd really love to get this, or does it just kind of have to be how things come along?
Yeah, it's kind of how things come along. We do work a lot on exposure and introducing either our land or our buildings to new people. So then they bring new people to us, and then that snowballs into more people and more companies and so on. I'd like to continue with the food cluster. It complements the environment, and so there's some neat things we're looking at, and including energy, solar energy, or having an advantage in the region. So a lot of exciting things.
Perfect. Char, thank you so much for joining me here today. That's been Fox Valley Headline Makers. Have a great day.